Since The Amazing Spider-Man was planned as a cinematic universe, it should come as no surprise at all that the plan was to copy what Marvel did, and separate their overarching story into phases. Phase 1 of The Amazing Spider-Man would have had to end eventually, and the planned last movie might have been the most ambitious one yet. This movie was The Amazing Spider-Man Carnage, so what if it happened? So somehow, Cletus Cassidy would have survived the events of the Venom movie and lived to fight another day, and this movie would have been the TASM Universe's answer to a huge event movie like The Avengers. This would have been a direct follow-up to The Amazing Spider-Man 2099, which would have ended with Miguel O'Hara falling through a portal that takes him back in time to the 2010s, where he meets Peter Parker Spider-Man. Meanwhile, Carnage has become extremely powerful, way too powerful for Spider-Man to possibly hope to fight by himself, and on top of that, Carnage is now being backed up by Morlun as well. So now Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2099, Venom, Black Cat, Silver Sable, and the Sinister Six would all have to team up and defeat the two biggest villains of the series so far, and while it's never been officially stated, I wouldn't be that surprised if Spider-Gwen appeared in this movie, and possibly even Miles Morales, although Miles wasn't a thing when this movie was being planned, but maybe they would have included him after he got popular in the comics, who knows, but there were also plans to include Spider-Woman and Spider-Girl in future movies, so maybe they would have also been in it, but I personally think that they'd wait for Phase 2. Now, the movie seemingly would have been rated PG-13, with a possibility of a rated R extended cut released directly to home video, as even Sony agreed seemingly that Carnage was a villain that needed bloodier violence, but they didn't want to alienate viewers because, remember, this was a pre-Deadpool world. This was before rated R movies were a guaranteed moneymaker. Now, something else huge that I should bring up at this point is that Sony was considering re-debuting Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in a crossover, so maybe he would have been in this movie as well, because they were very keen to eventually bring him back to the franchise, because honestly nobody was really ready for Tobey Maguire to leave, and neither were Sony, so this movie seemingly would have once again been produced by the brain trust of the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, which consisted of Drew Goddard, Amy Pascal, Jeff Pinkner, Mark Webb, Roberto Orsi, Alex Kurtzman, Matt Tolmach, and Avi Arad, a brain trust which was supposed to produce pretty much all the post-TASM 2 movies. However, in the end, this movie never even got close to being made. The Amazing Spider-Man universe ended up being cancelled fairly early on, and only managed to get 2 movies deep into what was meant to be a 10-movie phase. Ultimately, the unexpected failure of TASM 2 with critics eventually led to Sony deciding to work with Marvel Studios on bringing Spider-Man into the MCU instead, and the rest is history. So now, what do I think of The Amazing Spider-Man Carnage? Honestly, this one actually sounds like a really good idea. Like, if they were going to do a Spider-Man equivalent to the Avengers, this is it. This is a movie I can actually imagine people showing up in droves to see, because you can't tell me a movie that has Andrew Garfield Spider-Man and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man possibly teaming up wouldn't sell money on its own, but then you throw in characters like Spider-Gwen and Spider-Man 2099, and Venom, and Black Cat, and Silver Sable, and the Sinister Six, and then you have them all going up against, like, Carnage? Like, you can't tell me that that movie wouldn't be a hit. Like, okay, critics might not like it. Like, I'm not saying that it doesn't sound a little overstuffed. Like, I think a movie this big could possibly be split into 2 parts, and I don't think too many people would mind that. But then again, people said that The Avengers was too big for a movie, and the first Avengers movie ended up being really well paced. It didn't feel rushed or dragged out at all, and it also didn't feel rushed, so maybe they could have done it, because, like, they had a brain trust. They had plenty of people on board, to come up with ideas. Like, I honestly do think that most of the Amazing Spider-Man movies after the second one would have been a huge improvement, especially when you got somebody like Drew Goddard on board. I really like that guy's work. Like, he worked on the Daredevil TV show, which is one of the greatest things that the MCU has ever given us. Not to mention, I just have to reiterate again how epic this movie sounds. Like, okay, they were gonna debut Spider-Gwen in the Silver Sable movie, but I complained that the Silver Sable movie seemed a little too small for that. This sounds like, a movie worthy of all these characters being in it at the same time. Because, as I said, I thought that, they were going to include, Venom and Spider-Man in the Black Cat movie, and then they were going to include, all this other stuff in the Silver Sable movie, and I couldn't help but think it was too much for those movies. But now this is a movie dedicated to a huge team up. Like, it's not a movie that has one character's name on the title and is then just going to be about that one character. Like, yeah, I know it has Carnage's name, but he's the villain, so it's a little different. This was not going to be a Carnage movie. This was going to be a movie, this was going to be a Spider-Man movie or a Spider-People movie with Carnage as the main villain. So it's a different thing than, like, when you do a Black Cat movie, which is going to have Black Cat as the main character, but then you make it all about Spider-Man and Venom. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that was a problem. This actually sounds justified. This is a live-action Spider-Verse, basically. I mean, even if they didn't get Tobey Maguire in this movie, this would still be, you know, a really successful film, in my opinion, at least financially. Like, I still think people would come in droves to see a crossover this big, even if Maguire wasn't in it. Not to mention, you know, this was before Carnage had actually been in one of the movies, and people have been dying to see Carnage in one of the movies. And okay, I admit, he would have been in the Venom movie already by this point, but this would be a movie that really presents him as the ultimate threat. Like, you know, the threat that all these people have to come together to fight. He would be the Thanos of the Amazing Spider-Man. And I think that fans of Carnage would like this movie even more than the Venom movie. Now, do I actually think it would be a good movie? It's hard to say. As I said, you know, the Avengers made it work, but these are different people. Like, this is a different cast, a different premise, you know, different people behind the scenes, a whole different company, in fact. So, like, I don't know. Like, you know, this movie would require a lot of money that I don't know if Sony would be willing to spend, honestly. But I think they would, because Spider-Man's still, I believe, to this day, their most profitable franchise. So maybe they would fork over the money. I mean, but then again, you have to remember that they only finally did Spider-Verse in an animated form, because animation is cheaper than it would be to do all this in live action. At least I think it would be. Let me know if I'm wrong, but that's what I think. So who knows? I mean, I don't know if Sony would be willing to get completely behind it enough to make it work, but I like to think they would. And even if they, you know, even if this movie sucked, as I said, it would still be a huge cash cow. And I absolutely think that they would want to do another movie like this as soon as possible. Phase 2 would have a lot to live up to as far as hype is concerned after a movie this big. But anyway, guys, let me know in the comments down below. Would you have liked to see The Amazing Spider-Man Carnage? Would you have liked to see any of the canceled Amazing Spider-Man Phase 1 movies? I'd love to hear all about that in the comments down below. Also, make sure to follow me on my new Instagram account, Rinzler_Productions. Give me more what-if recommendations in the comments down below. Give this video a thumbs up, and share it with all of your friends on all your various social media platforms. And I'll see all of you in the next video.